midnight conversation in Polaroid memory.
Welcome to the Daily Allegory through Astrological Divination. Today we're going to start with a magic motto. Word witchery, you know. By Mercury's cold truth and Saturn's iron debt. What you forged in shadow now returns in light, and every stolen name is now reclaimed. In the hour their lives began to calcify into official truth, the spirits of Solomon, Andros, and Lucifuge Rofakel, joined by the ancestral presence of a formidable Iroquois shaman, moved like a tribunal through the unseen, turning every falsified affidavit and whispered obituary into a lever of karma against the architects of eradication who literally tried to steal a living man's identity, wealth, and future by insisting that he was factually dead. The plan hinged on a hired hitman, somebody contracted probably using cryptocurrency on the dark web trying to be clandestine and incognito. Now, this contract is later revealed as an undercover Delta Task Force mercenary who's been embedded in this group to collapse a sprawling cult, which is being labeled a domestic terrorism group. National security issue, if you will. And then the impossible happened. The man that they tried to bury a narrative surfaced out of nowhere. Healthier, wealthier, and razor-focused out of nowhere. Almost as if it was intentional, like planned that way. Shredding the smear-circling storylines with calm precision as the world learned the twist. He had anticipated their move, their malice from the start, kind of made himself live bait. A little bit of chase the dragon, if you will. You usually see this in crackheads. But, you know, intellectual, cult-like people, you know, definitely follow the MO of a crackhead. Engineering a slow, documented checkmate that captures their every tactic and exposes just exactly how predictable they are, that they'd been seen the entire time. It's kind of like a child playing peekaboo. I still see you. Now, watching him thrive, the group's certainty curdled into a dread as rumors spread that he wasn't merely human, but something a lot older. An immortal lineage predating the myths that they hid behind, until escape routes evaporated, masks fell, and every illusion that they cast dissolved. With Neptune's haze no longer obscuring their true nature as Saturn's hard ledger arrives to chain them to a shocking catalog of crimes that rattles the nation. National news. Today's story is called the Mercury Ledger. They finalized the death with ink, not bullets. 3 signatures on a notarized page, a stamped seal, and a practiced voice repeating the same sentence into the right ears. Factually dead. The Circle had learned long ago that reality could be engineered if you controlled the paperwork, the story, and the witnesses. You know, coerced or blackmailed, however you control people. In their private rooms under soft blue light and salt bowls, they rehearsed the narrative until it felt inevitable. They called it erasure. A polite word for a brutal craft. Removed a person, inherit the identity, siphon the assets, and let the world's memory collapse into whatever what was most convenient. Their hired hand was supposed to be simple, an untraceable hitman, a clean exit, no mess. But the man who accepted the contract had a rather different mission stitched beneath his skin. Delta Task Force, off-grid, clandestine, deployed to topple the massive cult the Circle served without admitting it served anyone at all. He watched him like a field scientist watches a virus, curious, careful, waiting for the right moment to let the contagion reveal its patterns. The man, the one declared dead, woke in a place that smelled of ozone and antiseptic, with a gap in his memory that felt less like amnesia and more like a splice in film. It's like somebody drugged him or something and intentionally tried to facilitate an accident. He had believed the obituary the world recited, believed the void they built around him because the mind tends to accept what's repeated with confidence, and yet his body recovered with an uncanny speed. As if the event that should have ended him had instead reset him by accident. By the time he surfaced out of nowhere, he was wealthier than the Circle had planned for, resources redistributed through trusts and dead drops, accounts that had been waiting for a date and a phrase, contingencies that clicked into place with mechanical elegance. He returned not as a victim, but as an instrument, like a clandestine military asset or walking weapon, for lack of a better phrase. Focused, calm, and quietly amused by the narratives orbiting him like gnats. In interviews he never gave, in sightings no one could actually ever verify. In financial motions that looked like accidents until they didn't. He dismantled his smear campaigns with the precision of someone solving a proof, like a quantum computer solving an algorithm. The circle told themselves it was luck. Then they saw the pattern. Every lie they told arrived back to them as consequence. Each falsified affidavit resurfacing as a chain around an ankle. Each whispered death returning as a loss that they couldn't really explain. That was when the other presences arrived. First as pressure changes, then as sound. The hitman heard it in the vents, a low metallic chime that didn't really belong to any building system. The witness heard it in their own voice when they tried to rehearse the story again. The words came out wrong, rearranged, exposing intent. Intent's a very important word, too. Intent and motive. The circle's leader found their handwriting changing mid-sentence. It's like when you write something by accident because you're so used to using it when you're committing fraud that you do it by accident on an official document. I'm sure that'll play out well in court. Like a harassment lawsuit. You framed yourself there. As if someone else had taken a pen, and the man, always watching, always recording, began leaving small, impossible markers in places only the circle would recognize. A seal impressed into candle wax, a coin balanced on its edge, a paper crane folded from a copy of the death certificate. Each marker carried a faint, biting intelligence, like a message from a courtroom whose walls couldn't really be seen. The circle called it haunting, but the hitman, trained specifically for psychological operations, recognized something else. A behavioral cascade triggered by stress, guilt, and exposure. Then he saw a shadow move across the camera feed that had no corresponding body. He watched the door unlock without being touched. He heard on a recording played back at half speed 2 names braided into static. The demons of the Ars Goetia, Andras, who was the gentleman's sole guardian demon, and Lucifuge Rofakel, kind of like a protective uncle. The man did not invoke them in public. He didn't need to. He carried something like a Solomonic anointing where 144 spirits specifically just obeyed his presence and energy. Mercury in Aquarius was everywhere in the story. Cold intellect, networked revelation, information as weapon. The man spoke in clean, engineered phrases that sounded like empathy but were actually design. It was almost like he was speaking euphemistically in clever analogies to say the thing without saying the thing. He built a lattice of disclosures distributed across anonymous accounts, court filings, encrypted drives, and time releases. Each piece alone looked like a rumor. Together, they formed a map. It was like the chaos had a structure and a purpose. Bigger picture. You can't really tell what you're looking at originally. It's chaotic. And then when it all comes full circle, the big picture is seen. The circle tried to counter with emotions, tearful statements, moral panic, sympathetic proxies. But the air had changed. Aquarius does not care how you feel about facts. And remember, not all opinions are facts, but absolute statements are truths, and truths are always facts. It cares whether the system holds. Now, the man's strategy had the texture of quantum mechanics. He treated the circle as a closed system under observation, knowing that measurement changes behavior. He didn't chase them, he watched them. And in being watched, they collapse into their most defensible, most incriminating states. Kind of like particles forced into certainty, they begin leaving tracks. At the center of the pressure was the 4th house. Home, roots, hidden foundations. Where Mercury conjoined a sensitive degree Venus, a conjunction that didn't feel romantic so much as forensic. Private affections became evidence. Old texts became exhibits. Family stories, once the circle's camouflage, turned into a ledger of motives. Venus there wasn't softness, though. It was attachment, the precise location of what people would do anything to preserve. Mercury touched it and translated it into language, into records, into trails. The circle had weaponized intimacy, gained access through charm, promises, fake concern. Now every private doorway that they had used became a point of entry for consequence. Meanwhile, the Aquarius stellium, Venus, Mercury, Sun, Mars, and Pluto, 5-point stellium, made the atmosphere clinical and merciless. With the affection, being Venus, fused to logic, which is Mercury, identity and will is going to be the Sun fused to the action of Mars, and then fused to the underworld engine of exposure, Pluto. The man didn't just want to survive. He wanted to transform the narrative ecology so the circle could never hide again and do it to anybody else, ever again. The ancestral spirit arrived last, not as spectacle, but as absolute gravity. It came through dreams first, shared dreams, the kind that leave the same residue in multiple minds. The circle saw an elder with eyes like river stones, standing in a longhouse that was also a courtroom, speaking without even moving his mouth. The language was in English, though, but meaning bled through. You do not get to unmake a life and call it law. When the circle woke, they found small signs of a presence that wasn't theirs. Ash patterns in bowls they had cleaned, beads arranged in a line that mirrored the dates of their crimes, a faint scent of cedar where none existed. The hitman, who had been trained to doubt mysticism, began to doubt his own doubt, because the consequences were too tailored, too intimate, too accurate. Someone or something was indexing their sins with a meticulousness that felt like Mercury and Aquarius with a knife. As the man's releases continued, the circle's world began to decohere. Their allies stopped returning calls. Their lawyers began asking cautious questions that they'd never asked before. One of the circle tried to flee and found their passport was flagged. Not because of a new charge, but because of an old report that had finally surfaced. An incident they buried under a clerical error. Another member went to bribe a clerk and found the clerk already terrified, already aware, already quoting from documents the circle hadn't really seen in years. It was as if time had become non-linear, their past actions tunneling forward like quantum tunneling, with all barriers being ignored. Improbable outcomes suddenly became inevitable. The man exploited that sensation. He leaked evidence in ways that made it feel like the system itself was punishing them, like the universe had turned prosecutor. The circle panicked and did what panicked groups always do. They tightened ranks, amplified loyalty tests, demanded confessions, hunted a traitor to explain the collapse. The hitman mercenary watched them cannibalize themselves and understood the cult's true shape at last. It wasn't just a cult theater. It was a machine for coercion and identity theft, a factory for manufacturing truth out of repetition. And the man, who the circle now whispered might not be human, might be immortal, might carry a lineage older than their borrowed religions. Let the rumors breathe, because rumor was also a measurement tool. Fear makes people sloppy. Fear makes people speak. When Neptune's fog finally lifted, there was no more glamour. Glamour spells, all baneful magic wore off. No more soft-focused deniability. The circle's faces looked unfamiliar even to themselves. Their self-image had become a costume, and now Saturn arrived like a bailiff. Cold, timed, unavoidable. Subpoenas fell, audits opened, a sealed federal inquiry unsealed. The catalog of crimes wasn't just a single scandal, though. It was a constellation. Forged documents, perjury, wire fraud, coercion, attempted murder, conspiracy, etc. And that's a short list. And the sickening elegance of a plan built to erase a person and wear his life like a mask. The balls. The nation didn't just gasp, it recalibrated. People who'd repeated the factually dead line had to reckon with how easily that they accepted that statement. How willingly they'd become instruments. In the final sequence, captured on courthouse cameras and phone footage, the kind of mundane setting where nightmares love to end, the man walked just past the circle without even looking at them. He didn't need to. Their terror was no longer about him surviving. It was about what his survival proved. He was a walking testimony. As he passed, one member whispered a plea to anything listening. The air turned sharp, though. A hush fell. And then in the thin space between breaths, the circle heard it, a layered voice like two radios overlapping. Andras and the snap of consequences, and Lucifuge and the cold arithmetic of debts collected. And the Elder's gravity anchoring it all to something older than their games. Not a threat, a verdict. Wouldn't want to piss off a passed over Iroquois ancestral shaman. The man stepped into daylight, untouched by their narrative. Behind him, the circle's illusions fractured completely. And under the relentless Aquarian light of Mercury, unblinking, impersonal, precise, their constructed reality collapsed into the only state it could hold. The truth, finally observed. We're going to end this with the invocation of the Mercury Ledger. Mercury and Aquarius, witness and wire, cold mind of the sky, let truth compile. Let every word become record, let every record become weight. By Andras, breaker of false crowns, turn hunted intent upon the hunter. By Lucifuge Rofocael, keeper of hidden accounts, open the books they thought were sealed. And by the ancestor who walks before names, the one whose gaze remembers what lies try to erase, stand at the threshold of the fourth house, where roots are buried and motives bred, and let what was done in secret speak in daylight. Let the forged signatures tremble, let the perjured mouths forget its script, let the liar's mask slip at the sound of its own voice. Let their death return as evidence, not as ending, but as exposure. Venus with Mercury at the sensitive degree, translate attachment into testimony. Sun, Mars, Venus, Mercury, Pluto, and Aquarius, ignite the network. Sharpen the blade of fact, collapse all illusions into a single state. True. No Boolean or foo. True and absolute. Saturn arrived with a ledger of consequence. Bind each act to its author. Bind each theft to its thief. Bind each narrative to the hands that wrote it. And to the ones they declared gone, walk forward. Not as ghost, not as rumor, as living proof. So the ledger opens, so the ledger speaks, so the ledger collects. With the divine authority I contain, this whisper is now law that underlies law. That's all I have for you today, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Make good choices.